Okay, so today's herd medicine video, I wanted to talk a little bit about boundaries. So one of the, I think one of the core teachings that I learn with horses is how to hold and have a different relationship with boundaries, physical boundaries, energetic boundaries, emotional boundaries, etc. I also think boundaries and our dysfunction around it in human society is at the core of a lot of dysfunction. We are not taught how to hold boundaries properly. It shows up everywhere, I think, in our personal relationships, in our business relationships. And I think, at the heart and core of a lot of imbalances, we can root it down to something around boundaries. I'm sitting here with Malachi, who is one of our brilliant teachers around boundaries, in particular energetic boundaries and the sensitivity we have around them. And I wanted to share something that I was sort of percolating around yesterday. I've done a lot of work around boundaries, and I still think it's one of those things that I'm still learning about. I think consistency with life, there's always layers that we're learning. So I guess I'm in the process right now of creating a new container for sharing my work. And one of the things that often shows up for me around resistance is because I have a tendency to not be super clear in how I hold boundaries in my spaces with my clients, meaning I am an overgiver, and I tend to be very accessible and very available to my clients. I've also sort of watched myself in a pattern over the last couple weeks where I'm absorbing a lot of my client's process. And I sort of caught myself doing it, and I think I've been blindly doing it for a while. And I was sitting with that last night because I noticed I was starting to get depleted, and I had some anxiety coming up around some interactions with my clients, and they weren't bad interactions necessarily. And what I noticed is I'm still involving myself too much with my client's journey and process, and that is a boundary thing. So as somebody who is a mentor, facilitator, who deals with people's journeys, and I have a very high value of care around, tending to my clients, I overstep that boundary when I start to really consume myself or take on what they're processing. So as I'm creating this new container, I watch that come up. And so how that I guess manifests for me is I'm resistant to creating something or stepping into a new space because there's a part of me that really fears you're going to take on too much and you don't have the capacity for it. And so part of my curiosity when I'm in that space is looking at what's driving that, what's driving that resistance. For me, it often comes into boundaries. For this particular case, it's a little bit of the energetic emotional. And so part of my process is, first of all, looking at what is the story or belief system that I create as my role of mentor or guide or teacher that says that I have to take on the journeys of my clients. And what's the consequence to that, right? So as somebody who does space hold for other people, that's what I call it. And what I've learned from my horses too, they can create the container, but they don't take on the emotional process of the people that come in here because that's not their job. And so what I've been doing is because of, and I think what this is rooted down into is my own insecurity of wanting to feel validated or valued in my work. And so I have this story that in order for me to feel that way, I have to be overly invested with my clients and consumed by their journey. It's not healthy, and there's no boundary there. So my correction is really pulling back of, number one, my own thoughts and my worries about where my clients are on the journey. And number two, what does that look like in terms of the in-between support I'm giving people? Do I need to create some boundaries around accessibility or expectation? That's also on me to hold, by the way. And noticing the effect of that in terms of how I feel around my work. So this comes up a lot when I'm working with my clients, because I tend to work with a lot of, I think, very heart-based, purpose-centered women that care a lot about their people. And from that place of caretaking that we think we're being in service of, we're actually not, you know. And so this one will pop up a lot, not just for me. That was interesting for me is I actually thought, I'm like, oh, I've gotten really good at this. Sneakily, this has been popping up for me and I wasn't even conscious of it. But I was paying attention to a little bit of that anxiety, depletion, resistance, and rooting it back to this. And so one of the things that I've learned with my horses, and this is, you know, I'm sitting with Mr. Sir over here, Mr. Malachi, because he's been a brilliant teacher for that, is to really be clear, first of all, when I'm stepping into a relationship with a client or I'm defining my containers, to really be clear about what is my role, and also really catching myself. You know, sometimes I think when we're overgiving or we're being a caretaker, we think that we're doing it from a place of care for the client. And really what's happening is we're doing it from a place of validation for ourselves. See how he's licking and chewing back there? So when the horses lick and chew, that's confirmation. So it's really self-serving. I'm over caretaking for my clients. I'm worrying about them. I'm being overly consumed because I have an insecurity that my work isn't enough or I need to be doing more. So it really is not rooted from the care of the client purely. It's also about my own validation. So how do I correct that? I sit with that and really define, you know, what is my role as a space holder? Where does my value come from? And any insecurity that I have around that role, I have to deal with that. That's not for my clients to take on, and I have to watch where I impose that. And so the tweak for me is just my emotional investment. So if I find myself worrying about a client, or again, I'm getting overly invested in their journey, I need to pull back. And there's just like the way that I do that, it's just an energetic and emotional thing. Just stop thinking about my clients and their process when I'm not on the call. There's also sort of an energetic, just being intentional, and I watch the horses do it too. After they hold space in a session with a client, they'll often roll or they'll walk away to just end the energy exchange. And so I want to start practicing that with my sessions, that exchange of energy doesn't continue past the session. It doesn't mean I'm not there for interim support, but I don't have to take on that energy in between. And so what my practice is, I need to watch that. Now, in relationship to this new container that I'm creating, part of what's easing the resistance is for me to spend some time and really define those boundaries for me. And in terms of how much I give in that space, if it starts to feel anxious because I feel like I'm packing in more calls or whatever because I'm scared it's not going to feel valuable, I need to listen to how it energetically feels, not my fear, if that makes sense. And so if I'm starting to create the outline of a space and I start to get anxiety around it, I need to pull back and look at, am I overgiving somewhere, or does there need to be a deeper, more deeply defined boundary in how I'm holding that space so I can move forward? So again, we have to pay attention to our feelings. If we're starting to feel anxious in connection to our work or depleted, I think that's a boundary cross. Most likely, or more likely, we have not defined that with our clients, or we are over invested in imposing ourselves onto our client's journey. And even though it's an energetic thing, that's still a boundary cross. And it's also crossing our clients too, by the way. So this is the correction. So I just wanted to do a little bit of a video about that this morning with my guy Malachi, because he is a master at this. And he's very clear. So what I love about this horse is if myself or anybody comes into his space with a place of needing or taking his energy, so instead of it coming from that space of pure exchange, and it's almost like if we're being needy about it, honestly, he's not going to engage. He's just going to walk away. And so what he's really good at doing is teaching us where the impact of our intentions energetically, and so that we can kind of have that awareness and clarity of where is that being superimposed. And so if this is really resonating with you, my offer to you is this: pay attention to how you're feeling in relationship to your work and your clients. If there's things that are resonating here, spend some time a little bit with what's the story I'm creating, or belief system around my work and what my role is, and what does it look like for me to really listen to the energetic integrity of that space and lead from there. So it's us being a little bit more conscious of where we're creating and leading and facilitating from. This is also a little bit of self-leadership and self-mastery in connection to our work. So let me know how this lands if you have any questions. I just wanted to share a little bit of my own process around this. So many more layers to this, but this is just one of them. And yes, let me know if that was helpful, and we can further the discussion.